Good, how are you? Yeah, my name is Soleil Romero. I am a energy worker, healer, a meditation teacher. My work is definitely in the metaphysical realm, so I do also like sound healing. I teach various forms of yoga. I am 33 years old. My background is Spanish and French primarily. I went to college for psychology, and entering college, I always thought I would be in the realm of therapy, being a psychologist of some sort. That was actually what my mother did primarily in her occupation, was a therapist. I graduated with a BA in psychology from the University of North Carolina. That was in 2010. So that is kind of what started my whole journey into this work. At the time was knew about energy work. My mother also had that in her background, meditation as well. What influenced me into this line of work probably actually would be twofold. First, that my mother and I were so close. She was my best friend, and I learned so much from her. She's now passed. She passed about 5 years ago. She was what I would consider definitely a mystic. She was also very much into the metaphysical realm. She too was a Reiki healer, which is the foundation of my being an energy worker. But her primary work was as a therapist. The truth of the matter is that in order to learn this work and to really kind of immerse yourself into the metaphysical realm, you have to learn it for yourself. So while she held the container for that learning, I still was able to find it on my own. I believe that I do, and any kind of healer would tell you, have sort of metaphysical gifts, so to speak, wherein I was sort of born with the innate capacity to read energetically and to attune to the energy, that the information that vibrates. So it was already within me, I would say, most definitely. It always really aligned with me because mental health was something I always thought was an important thing that we can address in our society, and a really kind of pivotal factor for bettering society and bettering the people. My highest compliment that I've gotten my whole life is always about my energy, and I do feel that that kind of helped me bridge into what I'm here to do. So it was always there. I definitely wasn't necessarily completely aware of it outside of like reading tarot cards and like talking to my angels and reading all the synchronicities and being kind of enmeshed in this spirit world, so to speak. So that was always a part of my life, but it was never something I necessarily thought I would do for a living. So fast forward to graduating college, I moved from North Carolina back home to Seattle, where I'm from, and right away got into working as a counselor at an eating disorder recovery center. So in the program that I was in specifically, the people were there about 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. So many of us know, like being an empath, we carry the burdens of others, we feel the weight of others, of the world, and we end up even carrying the pains of others. So I think I really started to find that and feel that in my work in the recovery center, because I would just leave so weighted down. Whereas generally I'm pretty like light and upbeat and good to go. It got me to thinking, why is there so much heaviness? And where does this come from? And then how do I, as a highly sensitive person or an empathic person, facilitate my ability to carry that weight, to maybe transmute it, or why is it that I don't feel the heaviness quite as much as others? And where does it come from? I do really believe that we have this full amazing capacity to be these totally actualized beings, and yet we aren't quite there yet, I would say. And so it just got me asking all of these questions. And then as I'm leaving work each day just feeling heavier and trying to figure out how to not carry the burdens of others, and I had to kind of fine tune my capacity to hold space for others while not taking their pain. And by the end of it, I had what I kind of consider my spiritual awakening weekend, which everybody kind of on their spiritual path usually has maybe a number of times that kind of like propel you forward into your work and your gifts. Mine, in fact, was a weekend I had come down to visit LA, and there was a number of very synchronistic events that happened that weekend, and I left being like, I have no other choice but to change the world. It's my only option. I feel that what's happening right now on the earth is unacceptable. We have so much more potential as human beings to live so much happier and better and clearer, and like there's so much more about the human being that we don't even realize. And I started to think about how much we know about everything externally. We have all the technology around vacuum cleaners, and yet we still don't even know about ourselves. So that pivotal question for me was, how do I learn more about the human self? And because it is within the self that all the answers are going to live. To clear out this heaviness and the weight and the pain that humans carry, it has to happen inside. It's the only way to go. Boy, there are so many ways that meditation has impacted my life. I would say, first and foremost, I feel that I found a pretty integral foundation of peace within myself. And that expresses itself in many ways. I think that it's important that we realize that these practices are not to not face hardship in life, because the truth of the human experience is that we're always going to face both highs and lows, and that they are both equally valuable along our journey in becoming more of ourselves. So for me personally, it has really helped me find a center place. I like to call it a home frequency. So I feel that that sort of fundamental foundational level of peace is probably the number one way that I have seen the kind of direct benefit of meditation. But there's so many other ways. In truth, I think that the truth is that we spend so much of our days in our mind. In fact, all of society is sort of built intellectually. We're sort of conditioned and trained to cater to our thoughts and be sort of in the storyline that passes through our minds. And when you can unhinge from that, you're able to be a little bit more present and available to reality as it's really happening. So I think for me personally, being able to discern between what's the storyline playing in my head and what's actually real has helped me find and be in touch with not only myself, but reality in a different way. Because we oftentimes, something will happen and then we filter it through our thoughts. So, and especially when our thoughts are hinged to past experiences. And what I mean by that is if something happens in your life and it is sort of a trigger point or a trauma point for you, you end up being sort of activated into a past version of yourself. So when you meditate, what happens is you build out the capacity to be more available to things as they are now versus how they relate to who you have been in the past. So for me personally, when things happen, I can identify, this is something that's pinging for me, something that's happened before. So I have the option now at choice point to be in a conditioned response based on what's happened to me before, or to choose differently. And so the idea then, when you have that sort of self-awareness, is that you're always choosing up to be a better version of yourself in every moment and with everything that happens, versus sort of reverting back to old ways of being, or sort of staying stuck in the cycle of what you might call kind of a trauma cycle, or an experience that has kind of kept you looped in a way that's not necessarily healthy or helpful for your personal evolution. So I think all of those things considered, inner peace, self-awareness, a little bit of a deeper connection to reality, a deeper connection to other people, an availability to presence. Those are all sort of ways that meditation has benefited me personally. I would say, as far as my mental state in regards to whether it was the same or different than childhood, and or if it's improved, both. I would say that it's ever improving. In fact, I don't believe as humans we ever arrive into our best self. And I think that that's what you start to realize on this journey of awakening, so to speak, or even on the spiritual path, or even just as a human being, that we always sort of look to the future as if when I get here, I'll feel more complete, or I'll be able to be more proud of who I am, or I will have achieved something. So therefore I can kind of chill and do whatever it is. But on the path of self-actualization, you're never done. So what meditation helps you see is that everything here in your immediate reality and beyond, frankly, is an opportunity to become more of yourself. Yes, I've definitely experienced anxiety and depression in my life. I feel, depression in particular, I would say, really kind of took hold after my mom died. It was the first time I really experienced a sense of depression. I have always been kind of a lighthearted person and always kind of made sure my energy was good, and almost to a fault. I definitely consider myself kind of a people pleaser, so I felt like I had to kind of, as sort of an energetically attuned person, I had to kind of manage my spaces and sort of make sure that everybody in my space energetically was good, and I was sort of facilitating sort of an enlightened energy of my space, which is a lot to carry as a kid. And I found that, and because on the other side of that is like a depth. And I think that actually there's a very pivotal point in what I've learned along this journey, because I think that what we consider depression is the lower points of the human experience, this kind of lower vibrational, uncomfortable, sad, angry, feeling space in the feels, so to speak. And what I have learned is to not shy away from that. because there's so much to learn from there. And when you allow yourself to feel, when you don't avoid the feelings, that you learn from them just as much as anything else. They just as much as anything else are here to teach you. So that has been how I've learned to relate to any anxiety or depression that I have. Anxiety, the same. If you think of anxiety as truly energy moving through your body, right? So it's kind of this rush of like a pulse of energy, and the mind is like, what's happening? I gotta control this. And that battle is what creates sort of what you might call, then could go into, say, a panic attack. It's the mind being like, this needs to stop, and the energy is like, you're not gonna stop me, you know? And so suddenly there's this inner battle that's happening in a moment's time. So when I feel anxiety, and when you study energy, you learn that anxiety and excitement are on the same spectrum. So anxiety can actually translate itself into excitement if you are able to be really aware with the energy, not try to stop it, not try to control it, but channel it. So anytime I feel anxiety and kind of maybe get that sense of overwhelm, I kick my mind out of the show, because it's like, you're just gonna get in the way. I let myself feel it. And then I sort of ask the energy, or ask myself, how do I wanna channel this? What can I do with this that's actually gonna be beneficial, instead of holding it in and trying to kind of maintain or control it? Because it's actually a very powerful energy. Anxiety is like a rush of power, if you can see it that way. And granted, I'm totally oversimplifying it, because I understand that it's a struggle for many people. But I think when you meditate, you start to learn that everything that happens in your experience is actually helping you. Everything can be to your benefit. You can use any of these types of states of being to know yourself better. And so that has been my personal journey, is to use any state of being, sadness, anger, anxiety, depression, to know myself better, to go through it. I think people could find motivation in meditation in, well, I'll speak for me personally, and perhaps this can help, that to me it's fun to know myself better. And when I started on the journey of self-actualization, self-realization, it just gets exciting. There's nothing easy about this. But it takes the pressure off and the stress off when you can just say, okay, I'm here to learn. I'm here to evolve as this human experience. I want to contribute myself. I know that the best thing I can give to society is myself, as a great version of myself. And when you first get started in meditation, oftentimes people don't know where to start, or don't know how to start, or are a little bit nervous about it, because it's like, what's going to happen? And that's totally valid to feel that way, because it's a very unknown space to just be with yourself in a state of stillness. Let your mind do whatever it's gonna do. Let emotions come up if they're gonna come up. Let memories come up if they're gonna come up, whatever. Like, it's a very uncontrolled state. So at first, it's kind of maybe nerve-wracking or a little bit anxiety-provoking to wonder what's gonna happen when you sit with yourself like that. Over time, it's like, let's dive in. You know, mind you, I'm a Scorpio, and Scorpios are all about like diving deep, so it might just be me. But for me, it's actually super fun. Every time I sit down to meditate, I connect to something more, I connect a dot, I clear something out, I become more myself, I get a download of like something I need to do or something I need to tell someone. It did take me a little bit of time to start. For me, actually, what really started me on my meditation journey is chanting. The sound of your voice, and you can chant Om, or there's lots of other chants that you can chant, but there's something about sort of aligning energetically and sonically when you chant that kind of brings you into a little bit more of a grounded state. Now that's very unique to my journey. In fact, when I encourage people to start meditation, I usually don't give that example, but that's just the truth of how my journey really kind of started. I was always sort of into meditation and yoga before, because my mother introduced that to me. She was always very into meditation and yoga, so it was very normalized in my reality, even in my childhood. I found it for myself maybe 10, 15 years ago. So that's one way, but the truth of the matter is, whenever anybody asks me where to start with meditation, I say, sit with yourself for 5 minutes a day. Literally, if you can do it when you first wake up, if you aren't kind of in the tendency to grab for your phone, and if you are, you should definitely do it then and not grab for your phone, because we want to break that tendency. But if you just sit with yourself for 5 minutes a day and have no expectation. Now, you can put on background music, ideally without lyrics, because the lyrics are going to kind of draw your mind into what the lyrics are saying. Or you can just listen to the sounds of your space. You can listen to a guided meditation. That's something that I do professionally, and there's plenty of that out there. Lots of tools you could use, but if you literally just sit with yourself for 5 minutes a day, what it's going to look like in this beginning phases of your meditation journey is that you're sitting and thinking for 5 minutes. Completely fine. That's exactly how it's supposed to go. I think we have this false idea around meditation that you're supposed to be able to sit and just be totally like no thoughts for 5 minutes. You probably won't get there for like a few years, if ever, and the journey of meditation is like, for the first year or two, you're still thinking, but at least I'm thinking, okay, come back. So it's this constant kind of coming back to self. The breath is a great tool, because you can just kind of start with your breath, and then the mind will wander off, you come back to the breath. And then eventually you're like, I actually want to do 10 minutes today. That would be great. And in the 10 minutes, there might even be a little pause in your thoughts where you just have a total moment of utter presence. And there's really medicine. In fact, scientifically speaking, there's medicine when you can calm your mind and come down to your being and be totally embedded in presence and in your body and in reality, where the mind is not taking you to the future or running over your past. And it's really giving you an opportunity to be in your own nature and to reach towards homeostasis, because the mind is always taking us away from homeostasis. I would say that there are a number of root causes of anxiety and depression. I think that oftentimes we experience things in our life that create what you'd call kind of a trauma response in our bodies. And when we don't face those trauma responses or address them, then they sort of regurgitate themselves over the course of our lives, and we end up living them out constantly. One of the root causes is not having faced the experiences that have sort of formed who we are, shaped who we are, and or healed through them. And so as I spoke before about the importance of emotionality and allowing yourself to really kind of feel things, it's oftentimes we have sort of, say, a traumatic experience in our lives that happens in a moment's time, and then the body sort of responds in sort of a shock mode, so you're not even able to sort of feel the entirety of the experience at the moment, because the body is sort of trying to cope with what's happening versus like be completely in it. And so instead of ever kind of feeling it or allowing yourself to experience the truth of what happened, it just lives in your body. Oftentimes, anxiety and depression are your body's way of saying you have something you haven't looked at. There's still something here that's keeping you from being your full expression, keeping your system from working in its most efficient capacity. There's something held in your nervous system, in your energy field, in your body that you haven't addressed. And so what do then? We look at it and we feel it. So something like therapy is such a great tool for addressing depression and anxiety, because you have a witness, someone else who's holding a space for you to be in the experience. Oftentimes in therapy, these kinds of experiences come out where you get to talk about and sort of relive, if you will, which is important because you can feel the feelings that you sort of avoided or were not able to feel in the moment. I fully understand the value of Western medicine's angle of approaching anxiety and depression in softening the symptom. But when we think of energy work and meditation, we're really getting to the root. So instead of softening the symptom, we're saying we want to clear out what's causing this altogether, so that A, you don't have to feel that something's off anymore, and B, you can ultimately become more of yourself. So we're sort of eliminating these frozen aspects of who we are, and think the parts of ourselves that have kept us from accessing our truest self, and we go into that and we clear it out, so that way the system then is able to run a little bit more powerfully, and your energy then kind of makes itself a little bit bigger, and you're more attuned to who you really are, and you're more expressed in your fullest version of yourself. I believe that mental illness is still very misunderstood. I think that because mental illness lives in the mind, quite literally, we still see it as sort of woo-woo or like not that big of a problem. If I come in with a broken arm, everyone's gonna want to attend to my broken arm, right? If it's very clear, when we can see it with our eyes and we can all agree, like that arm is definitely broken, everyone here would come together and we'd be like, we need to figure out this broken arm. If I come in with a mental illness, A, because I would be able to conceal it, because most of us have learned how to conceal our imbalances, and or if I sit down and say I'm feeling super depressed, 50%, if not more, of the people would say, well, I'm not really sure how to deal with that, and it'll get better, and we don't say that about the broken arm because we can see it, it's very tangible, we know the steps to take to fix the broken arm, and we kind of have a rhythm set out in society of how we address physical illness. We don't have necessarily a system set out to address mental illness, and I think that that's the biggest thing, is it's just swept under the rug, and we think, if it's depression, it's gonna get better, just focus on being happy and focus on being positive, which in many ways is a bypass, because it's not about, you don't heal depression by simply just focusing on happiness. In fact, the idea of healing depression is not that instead of being depressed, you're gonna be happy all the time, because happiness all the time is not realistic, and it's actually not the point. The idea, as we sort of get into these practices, is just finding that baseline hum of yourself, so that when you're really low, you understand how to get back home to self, and when you're you're really high, you understand how to get back home to yourself. So instead of reaching towards, well, I want to be happy all the time, so we have this we've built in this dichotomy of like, if you're depressed, the opposing energy of that is happiness, so stay happy and stay positive. When we can talk about it though, and we can open the conversation around mental health and understand we all struggle with stuff. Every day is different. Our mind is doing something different every day. We face little traumas, if you will, many times. It's not uncommon that a day will happen even if you have to hit your brakes in traffic and your body kind of freezes, right? That's like a perfect example of a little trauma that your body's like kind of in a little shock from there, and then you can kind of soften back down. But it's learning that we're always sort of in an ever-changing and a very fluid state of being, especially when it comes to our mental health. And so allowing it to fluctuate, letting yourself be a little bit more aware of the fluctuations, meeting yourself where you're at, and then holding that space for others. Like yesterday, you were in a great mood. Tomorrow, you might be down. And as someone who loves you, I can hold the space for both without trying to take you out of being down. So as we start to kind of normalize this conversation around mental health, we learn how to hold space for each other even differently, wherein someone might be so sad and I can just sit next to you and just witness you in your experience. I don't have to change it. We don't even have to talk about it. I can allow you to have that experience. It can be completely different than mine. I can be in a totally great mood. I don't have to come down, but your experience is still valid. So I think normalizing and validating these conversations is like so important in then understanding them differently, allowing them to be a very real part of the human experience, and then healing the things that keep us tethered in the lower vibrational experiences. You know, there are certainly systems in place that keep us from even asking for help. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so big into meditation and energy work, is that you don't have to go anywhere. And you don't have to do anything, you don't have to reach for anything. It's truly just being in the experience. Now, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, because if you're in a very depressed state, the last thing you want to do is sit in your depression. So I fully understand. I think that, again, I would say honestly, the stigma is one of the biggest things that keeps people from really getting the help that they want or need. Because, you know, even saying you're depressed is like, we're still so like, don't know how to handle it. Yes, therapy is amazing, but not everybody can afford therapy. Not everybody has insurance to cover therapy. Medication is one option. If there's a true sort of chemical imbalance, medication can sort of help remedy that. But again, not all of that is available to everyone. So I think that obviously economic factors come into play. I think the stigma comes into play. I think the misunderstanding around what mental health even is, and the acceptance that it's a very normal part of the human experience to feel feelings, and that they're not always good. And in fact, a lot of times they're not good, so to speak, and eliminating this good and bad, because it's not bad either. None of it's bad. It's all helping you see yourself better. It's all an opportunity for you to heal something and grow from something. Group therapy, for example, is a really powerful tool, because to be witnessed in that space where you're uncomfortable and you're vulnerable and you don't want to be there and you feel low, you're angry or whatever it is, when people witness you in that space, there is so much healing that happens. Not only for the person being witnessed, but for everybody else that says, oh wow, yeah, I guess I kind of do feel that way too at times. And so it just normalizes it. So I think normalizing it, I think, is really the key, and then really working on addressing the root causes instead of just finding ways to cope with it. The normalization of these conversations, I think, is really totally key, because then we can all understand within our own experience, oh, this is normal. Okay, it is normal to feel sad. It is normal to want to lay in bed for 6 days and not get out of bed and just feel really down and like not want to do anything. That happens. And again, there's information there. It's always teaching us about ourselves. It's helping us to see ourselves better. And we can then support each other a little bit differently, because there's a lot of judgment around it still, I think. And oftentimes, though, judgment is a projection. So that is to say that when you judge someone else for their mental health or their mental illness, it's oftentimes because you haven't totally accepted your own fluctuation of self. So normalizing these conversations, being willing to talk about them, being willing to meet eye to eye on things, understanding that someone's burden is meant to teach them, but you can meet them in the space without like having to come down. I know for me personally with my friends, when a friend needs to talk to me about something that they're struggling with, you know, before she or he calls me, it's a text to say, hey, do you have space? And you know, that tells me they're gonna unload. And so I have to check in. Do I have the bandwidth? Am I able to hold the space without coming completely out of my experience or taking on their experience? Or do I even have the bandwidth to be able to have these conversations? When we start to verbalize and contextualize mental health and this sort of the fluctuation in the human experience and talk about that in a more normal way and sort of soften like this stigma and this tension around I'm so depressed and I have to go out and be in the world and I'm so uncomfortable in my body and I don't want to be here, and all these running thoughts that we have, and we can all meet there and understand we all have those days. And I think sometimes just that understanding is just such a relief, because it feels so isolating and you feel so alone in your experience when you're in those kinds of states. Having someone else say, oh, it's okay, I totally feel you, I've been there, I have felt that before, then it's like, oh, okay, all right, so we've normalized it, and then all of a sudden you can relate to it differently. Instead of kind of pretend it's not there, it's sort of the elephant in the room, then it's like, okay, well, you're gonna sit the elephant down, and now at least I'm gonna sit next to it, because at least everybody else understands that we all deal with this in some capacity. Yeah, I would just like to normalize, the full spectrum of the human experience. I think that meeting yourself where you are each day is really important. I know as a meditation and yoga teacher, that's often something that we come back to, is just really meeting yourself on your mat, so to speak, when you're practicing yoga or in your space, in your practice. And that's so true throughout life, right? And all of these practices are meant to be actualized in real time. So we sit down for meditation and you sort of meet these layers of yourself and you learn these ways of addressing the human experience. It's even more powerful than to really keep that and maintain that as you go out into the real world. So when we think about addressing anxiety and depression, I think it's important to understand that it can be present at any point and it can pop up at any time, and I'll speak to my journey specifically in the grief that I experienced surrounding the death of my mother, that it pops its head up at the most random of times. And there would be times when I'm in public or teaching when I'm feeling it, and to be able to meet it instead of avoid it and deny it or pretend it's not there really softens the experience or the hold that it has over you. And I hope we understand that healing really is possible. I think with something like depression, it is so isolating, and even anxiety so encapsulating that it feels like it's never going to end, or it's never going to go away, or we're going to have to experience it forever. And there is really truly a fundamental level of healing that's possible. And there really truly are a lot of resources within reach that we can reach to help us to heal from these kinds of things. And healing, again, is very subjective. Healing might just be that it's a little bit softer, or it doesn't take quite of a hold of you of next time. And healing is absolutely also very much a journey. I think we think of the healing journey as like this beautiful little trajectory into the sky of who you are. But the truth of the matter is, healing, instead of sort of looking like this, is more like do, right? And so you think like, oh wow, I've really healed from that. And then life is like, well, here's an opportunity to make sure you healed from that. And it's this sort of same circumstance beautifully packaged in a very different way. And so you have to kind of really address your healing in real time. So all of that to say, life is always helping us heal. It's always really truly giving us an opportunity to heal, to become more of ourselves, to know ourselves better. And while it can feel so daunting and so alone and isolating at times, the truth of the matter is that there's always space to become more of yourself. And the more you really just commit to your own healing, the more life facilitates that journey for you. It seems sort of whimsical, but it is true that the intention behind saying, I'm going to really devote to becoming more of myself, to figuring out why I'm here, to really diving into my mission and my purpose, life's like, yes, you are. And it just serves you all of the ways to help you find those answers and to reach towards more of yourself and to heal the things that keep you from really actualizing you in your fullest expression. So trust your journey, trust yourself, trust your medicine, trust that life is really trying to genuinely facilitate your evolution, trust what comes, and learn just how to meet life where it is, to meet each other where we are, to hold space for one another in ways that allows other people to fluctuate too. Because I think that once we can do that and really meet this mental health crisis at the center, where we all say, yeah, this is very normal, everything will change.